Yeah, before the artifacts disappear, yes, it's terribly important to recover what we can. But it's very interesting because John did say something about burials in Singapore during the battle. Because I was looking for some details for him, and we found all the references in the regimental nominal roll, or the map references where these men were buried. But for some reason, after the war, they were not traced. And of course, now with all the building that's gone on in Singapore, evidently when they find remains, they are supposed to stop.
Mm.
And John said he would mind betting that they don't stop.
Yeah.
Just keep it quiet and go on. I've tried to find the unit that was responsible for searching Singapore after the war, searching for these bodies, and I can't come up with anything at all. The only thing I've near enough come across is it was an Australian unit. Now that may or may not be true. I honestly don't know. But there's still a lot of people that were buried at a certain map reference, and they all use the same maps that have never been found.
Yeah.
And as the Commonwealth War Graves say, it may well be that person was buried in that map reference, but if there is no positive means of identification, can't put a headstone up. It has to go on a memorial.
Yeah.
So, but I agree with you, Barbara. It is important to do all the archaeology. And yeah, I said to John Cooper, if you're going out again, can I join you at my own expense? And he said, well, at the moment I'm not. And he said they are doing something at Ubin Island, or Palau Ubin, which is where my father was briefly. But he said it's going way back in time. It's not Second World War.
Yeah.
So, right, okay, well, I'm not an experienced archaeologist, so I'll duck out of that one. But I'll just keep my ears and eyes open and see how it goes.
What fascinates me is the number of people I've known who've come back from visiting the railway and bring back the railway the spars that held the track in place.
Yeah.
How many of those can there be? You know, it's is somebody making a trade out of them, or are these original? And should they really all be coming back?
They're original, and if the Thai authorities catch you, big trouble. So people really want to watch what they're doing. You're bringing out artifacts from Thailand.
But they're being given them at the museum often.
Oh, well, I believe that they are. Well, if Rod's giving them out, then that must be okay. He must have got that cleared.
Yeah.
They will be originals, Barbara.
Yeah.
In actual fact, we've still got some more originals at the NMA.
Yeah.
Which I'm thinking of moving up into the building and putting under lock and key before they disappear.
Oh yes, definitely, because these are ideal mementos of the family, for a family when they've been out there and they bring something back that they feel is really attached to that memory. But it doesn't affect me because my dad wasn't on the railway, but I do feel strongly that these things have got to come to an end and safeguard what is left for the future.
Now, if they are getting them from Rod, that's one thing. If they are lifting them from the railway itself, then that would be another. And I don't think, the railways had to be rebuilt anyway to take the modern locomotives because they're way heavier than the ones in the Second World War. But yes, I believe there are still sleepers out there. In actual fact, I would have to contact Rod and say, are there any sleepers out there? Because we could do with replacing those at the AMA.
Oh, right, yeah.
They're looking the worse for wear. They're gradually disintegrating in the climate we've got over here. I believe somebody at the NMA was retained and arrested for trying to take a spike. Yeah. I think it was from the Sumatra Railway out of the grounds, which is a bit of a worry. But I know they do get over the far side at night in the shot at dawn area. They have been getting the plaques stolen for the metal.
Oh, that's terrible.
That's bad.
Sickening, isn't it?
That is. Whether that has now stopped, I don't know. Because I said to somebody, why have you anchored all the tools down on the Sumatra Railway? And that's what he told me. He said, because we get people coming over and taking stuff. He said, not so much here, because obviously we've got the security's out and we've got cameras on the building.
Mm.
Actually, everything about putting cameras upstairs as well. But yeah, I know
Very sad.
it is really. It's terribly sad. I mean, I can't think of anything worse. It's like desecrating a grave, if you like.
Mm.
I mean, but to me, it's of a similar nature. It's a terrible thing.
We live in different times, and people have no consciences
respect.
about doing this. They just think of the money. But yeah, it is sad. Yeah.
It's very, very sad. Right, on a more positive note, FEPOW site. The liberation questionnaires have now been reorganized so that the headings that you see are the headings for the various files. So we will know how complete or incomplete they are.
Yeah.
There's been, over the past 10 days, I think, another 2,500 images that have been added.
Very good.
It's another load in preparation, and there's our volunteer going to queue to clear up the rest of the files he's not photographed. And the file that was missing at queue came back last year. They found it.
Brilliant.
So we're hoping to get all those done by the middle of the year. Then it's updating the names because they don't include the volunteer regiments, even though they were Chinese or Malay or whatever. So I've got all that to do. Got the information, that's not a problem, it's just working on it. And then we can update that and see if we can put a simple search in so you can find the name quickly.
So will this include all the Indian, Chinese regiments, and also were there any Africans involved as well?
It would include everybody that's on WO392, which was the master list, and they include Malays, Chinese, probably some other nationalities as well in the volunteer regiments, and also in the RAF. There were Chinese in the RAF. So yes, they're all included. It's where they're not included that's going to be the difficult part, because the roles for the volunteer regiments in Malaya, bulk of them are missing. They were never returned with David Nelson, or they never came back to the UK, or they were retained somewhere else. So I can't tell you who was held captive. If he was European, I would suspect he will be on the roll, because they told the men, the Malays, go home and disappear. Well, they went home all right, but unfortunately there were people within the community over there that were pointing fingers to the Japanese and saying that guy was with the volunteers. So they were rounded up, and we know in a number of cases executed. And it's trying to find that information that we can put onto the roll. They are commemorated in their own country, so that's a really good thing. But I think if they were British service personnel, they should really be on that roll. But there again, it's finding out the information. That's a stumbling block. I mean, I can ask John Moffat, who's Malayan Volunteers Group, but I think that's going to be a big wish. Indian Army, from what I've been told by a friend of mine at Kew, who's been going there for 30 odd years and knows a load of people, the British Indian Army files were dumped in a warehouse just after petition, I think it was. And when they decided they better, just have a look at them and get this all done properly, researched and noted, went to the warehouse and the pile had rotted from the bottom up. British Library I've got to try, but I think there's only Indian Army officers. But again, I'll try, you never know, never what you can find. But again, looking through the liberation questionnaires, it's a question I've asked, have the Indian Army guys that are there, they're mainly officers, have their questionnaires been photographed? Because if not, I will go and do it. And then perhaps we can have a separate little block up Indian Army. And, people go in and have a look at, British Indian Army, I should say. And people can go in and look at those. Because I don't think they are commemorated in their own country.
That was just going to ask you. I mean, Australia is amazing at what they do over there for the FEPOWs and that. And also the Dutch and Americans. And what's happened just recently over here for that memorial for the fly past was brilliant. But you never hear about the Indians. But I'm sure you're aware on the COFEPO site, just this weekend, there was a picture of the Japanese using some Indian Army soldiers for target practice. And it sort of got me thinking, well, I wonder what they do. And that's why I asked you about the names for that. Whether they do any research, whether ever you get any questions, because obviously quite a few of their relatives must actually be over here as well. Does that sound right? Yeah.
No, that's right. I mean, I've only when I was at the Arboretum, I came across one lady who was looking for an Indian soldier.
Yeah.
It's her grandfather, and I explained to her why it's not in the building at the moment, that we want to correct that. The officers or European officers in the Indian Army will be noted.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the Indian Army officers, Indian Army, where there's questionnaires, and I can then go from there and see if I can find anything on the other ranks. And that's going to be the problem. You know, same with the Malayan Volunteer Forces, it's finding the information on the other ranks. But I'm not going to admit defeat yet. Give it a try.
Oh, thank you.
Number of projects.
Because we're coming up to the 75th anniversary, it isn't just fair that we remember our own FEPOW. I know I batter on about this. This is Patrick Toosey's fault because he had a go at me once for not mentioning the Ramusha. So ever since then, I remember the Ramusha. So next year, I think we must also try and include everybody, not just our own, even if it's sort of as a bit of a add-on. Does that sound right? It isn't just our FEPOW. They were supported by so many others from other countries, from people who weren't even in the military, the Ramusha. We have the stories of the internees, and we really need to make sure that if it isn't co-FEPOW or associated groups that do this, that the country is aware of what happened in the Far East. I just dread it next year. You'll see this, Keith, with my next Bar FEPOW newsletter. I'm starting to try and, encourage people to be aware of it.
I can certainly say something to the people organising the co-FEPOW do at Lichfield Cathedral. Say, look, can we include civilians?
Yeah.
And if you like, the native labourers, the Ramusha.
Terrible. What they went through, the more I read about them, it's horrific.
See, Japanese who are very, very good at keeping records, regardless of what anybody says, they were brilliant. Yeah. There are no records left of the Ramusha.
Yeah.
And they would have kept it from somewhere. Certainly there are war crimes reports from Ramusha. Got to see that. Yeah.
Interesting.
So some of those I'm going to have to try and photograph. Whether I can put them on the co-FEPOW website, I don't know. Yeah. Because copyright. That's a problem because people can download from the co-FEPOW.
Because talking to some of the internees that we were lucky enough to have contact with afterwards, they say they had no help coming back. But, the Ramusha were even worse.
Stop.
At least the internees made their way back if they wanted to their own countries. But the Ramusha were just left. Nothing to help them.
Yeah.
And I think, it's a big war crime in a way that's never recognised.
Yeah. No.
Because what you do during the war, it isn't just then, it's what you do to put it right afterwards as well.
Yes. Yeah. And I know when they went along the railway, I've read Lieutenant Colonel Woolmanhoven's report, and he went along the railway afterwards, and he was coming across these parties, and they were trying to get them back as best they could. They actually found a number of Gurkhas and their families that had escaped from Singapore to Thailand, working in a Thai mine for hardly any money and under conditions far worse than that on the railway.
And were they helped to get back to Nepal? Or thank goodness for that then. Yeah.
So it's a side that you say tends to be overlooked. I notice it's coming up more and more now when you talk about. Certainly, you talk about the Thai-Burma Railway, but on the Sumatra Railway, I was talking to somebody there a couple of years ago who does a lot of research on the Burma Railway, and actually I've got to contact him and see if we can put his details on the co-FEPOW site. The people that want to go out there, look at the Sumatra Railway, We looked at the number of Ramusha they said died on the Sumatra Railway, and it's 23 odd thousand. And he said you can multiply that by 4.
Really?
A lot more than that. One heck of a lot more. And
Yeah.
that's the ones that were lost on the hell ships.
Yeah.
Maru was the worst one.
And we fail to recognise the impact on their families and descendants, don't we? Who probably don't know what happened to them, and we're not going to be able to help them, really.
I mean, I've been trying to look for somebody. She asked about her grandfather. Unfortunately, she kept his medals, and it had his name there. And I eventually found him. I was looking through a file, a Colonial Office file, and came across all the nominal rolls for the volunteer regiments in Malaya and Singapore. And there was his name. So I actually sent her that. Said, this is all I've been able to find at the moment. No card, no questionnaire. She reckons he was on the railway, but he may have been on as a civilian.
Yeah.
There we go. It wouldn't surprise me if he was, because they did take a lot of people from Malaya. So it's one of these frustrating things. You can only go so far and no further.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And it's only natural that people want to know about their own relatives and, do that. In fact, another thing that I've only just looked up, because I tend to, knowing basically what happened to my dad, I don't look at his things anymore. But there was a query about when did families hear that their relatives were actually prisoners. So this morning, I thought, I've got to find out about my dad. So I did look it up, and I've actually got it here. Two reports to his parents. One dated the 8th of September 1943, and it's interesting because it's from the Savoy Hotel in Bournemouth, which is just by where FEPOW has some of its weekends, to say that Eric Taylor is Royal Artillery is a prisoner of war in the TAY camp. So I don't know quite what that means, so I have got some work to do. And then there was another one on the 18th of September as well, saying that he's a prisoner of war. So there was a couple there sent out to his mum and dad.
That TAY should be TAI.
Oh, right. Okay. That's interesting then. Yeah, that's TAY camp.
Saigon was Group 1 attached camp.
Ah, yeah. That's it. So there are things I still need to look at. And that is another bit that was an attachment to one of the things where it says, although no official prisoner of war report has been received from the Japanese government, an unofficial list which has reached the War Office states that the above named soldier was well on the 25th of May 1942. So this is the time gap between different bits of information being received, isn't it, really?
I wonder if the name source was somebody of one of the Free French in Saigon.
Yeah, it could well have been, couldn't it? Yeah. So, yeah. So I need to spend some time now looking back at what I've got from Dad, because I do tend to think, I pass him. I mean, I haven't even got him on Ronnie's Roll of Honour or anything like that. I have a very emotional attachment to my dad, and,
Did you ever do another page for the FEPOW building? Or?
I started this, I've got it half done, and then with all the different issues, I never proceeded, which is a shame for my dad. Bless him. Yeah, yeah. There can be other things that come in between the emotions and the realities, as you know, and yeah. So I need to go through this. I've got reports from Ernie Goff, who a lot of us know, don't we? Yeah, good old Ernie. And I keep with it now things like this that we had at the conference, which are amazing things to have to put with them. Yeah, so I'll go through all of that again. And while I was looking for my dad's things today, look what I found. Well, I've been talking about Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. That's this afternoon's plan. But I've got Mad Men by Arthur Lane, Unsung Heroes, Arthur Lane, and Lesser Gods, Greater Devils. I don't know if it's worth reading them. I've become a bit disenchanted with Arthur Lane.
Hold on a second. Phone's ringing. Oh, see who that is.
John, I'll have to let you have a go and tell us how you're getting on. I'll shut up for a bit when Keith's back.
Yes, I it's interesting what you say about the Ramusha. We all get focused into our own relatives, and
Yeah.
it's so frustrating trying to find my dad's journey, if you like, and not being attached to a regiment as such. He was in the RAOC in the
Yes.
18th Division workshops. It's very difficult to trace him. But
Mm.
I'll wait until Pete comes back now before I tell you everything. But it's been so frustrating in trying to get, and I've been looking back. And one of the things that I found out that I'm sort of writing a biography on my mum and dad for my daughters.
Yeah.
'Cause my mother was born in 1908
Hmm.
and she was 99 when she died. So there's a
Gosh.
huge history back there. And I
Yes.
found his enlistment papers, and an address was struck through. And you know what? I never looked behind the actual striking out of the, and
Mm.
they're from the Welsh valleys. Pardon me. And the address that he had on his enlistment papers was in Chester. Now
Oh.
I've asked
Mm.
the remaining members of the family, how did Mum and Dad get up to Chester?
Esther.
And
Mm.
nobody knows.
Yeah.
But when I looked at this 1939 census, have you looked at that one?
Now I've heard
No.
of
There
it.
was
No.
there was a census taken in 1939, I think, to find out who's in the country before the war started, I think.
Yeah.
And my father then is listed in, and my mother in Chester, and he was a mineral water salesman. So he was a driver,
Mm.
and a mineral water salesman reminds me of the old Corona
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
lorries, and I dare say, were they going around in, and how he
Oh yeah.
got from the valleys? He was a driver, drove milk lorries and all sorts of vehicles, and then he ended up in Chester, so for a short period of time.
Yeah.
So that was
That's
whether he
really
knew somebody.
interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
another thing that I'm looking at, but I won't get
Mm.
very far with that one, I don't think.
No.
But what was I going to say when Ronnie came back? Yeah, well, when Keith came back, REOC. Ronnie put on the REOC nominal roll, and I wondered how my dad got from from Singapore. Pardon me, from Singapore up to the railway, and when I eventually found out that he was in D-Force,
yep.
and so I wondered whether how he travelled up there. And obviously, he was in train number 6. Now I've got train number. I think Ronnie's got it at train number 34.
I know
Now I've had. Sorry.
Ronnie does it from all the trains for the ran from
Yes,
Singapore,
yeah.
whereas the
I
various forces do it from train 1 to, say, F Force 1 to 13. And
yeah.
that's the system I use.
So I got it down from Andrew Snow some years ago. Train number 6. So I wondered how he got. Was he mixed in with everybody else? But I did an analysis of the 2,000 names on the nominal roll, and 73 of the prisoners in D-Force were in the 18th Division workshops, and they went on the 20th of March, 43. Then the remaining 60 were in. They were in. There were men from 4 OSC, 14 section,
Right?
6 heavy anti-aircraft workshops, and ZAOW. So those 60 then went on the 22nd and 23rd up the line, if you like. So Dad with his comrades from the were all together there. So I was a bit more. I was a bit, I suppose, not pleased. That's not the right word, but I was glad to see that he was with his comrades in the workshop rather than
Mm.
split, because I know there's all sorts of regiments listed on part of his questionnaire. So that was a good bit of work. That was
I
Mm.
think on Find My Past,
right.
I can probably get the role for Train 6.
Can you?
I think I can. I can certainly give it a try. What was his? Have you got his full name? And I'll have a look.
William Austin Moses, Moses.
Right.
His number was 7366234, I think.
I'll certainly have a look.
Because it was about 600 men
Yeah, that's
per
40.
train, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, I given you the right number. 7363234.
7366034.
234.
Okay, I'll have a look, see what I can find.
Yeah.
It's Train 6.
Train 6.
Right. Okay. Have a look for that one.
Thank you. Also on the nominal roll, a lot of the REOC there were involved in Padang escapes. Now, is Padang an island?
Padang is on Sumatra.
Sumatra.
The last place that they could try and get ships out for either Ceylon and Australia.
Right.
And that's where most of the men ended up. And of course, there was no ships coming back in.
No. As I was going through the roll, this Padang escape came up March 1942, and that was interesting to find out. There was quite a number of names on the REOC, so they must have seen multiple escapes from Padang.
Yeah. I mean, I know a couple where they escaped from Padang. They one in particular, they made the mistake of taking a native boat. The native probably reported his boat missing, and
Right.
the Dutch police and the local police got involved, and they picked these guys up in the boat, and they said, "What were you doing?" They said, "Well, we're trying to escape. Can you help us? Well, why don't you escape with us?" And he said, "Well, you've really got to appreciate that in the surrender, we declared the capital an open city.
Right.
Part of that agreement, the armistice agreement, was there will be no escapes." Now he said, "I've got no option but to take you back, because if you look at myself and my native policemen here, the Japanese have our families to ensure that we return."
Yes,
So,
yes.
so that one failed, and I think that was the one that maybe Captain Apthorpe, British Sumatra Battalion. But there was a lot did try and escape from Padang. I don't know how many were successful, to be honest. I've not followed it through.
No.
I mean, I'm looking at the moment. We were talking about escapees last time for the Coast Gunners. We now know there were 110 escapees in total.
Obviously, on this nominal roll, we've only got the REOC, and I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, about 10 or 11 names on that roll.
Can always look them up.
Mm.
Can always look them up. What the names are. Can find my past and
Yes.
see if they're not there, they would have escaped, or
Yes. Yes.
on the Singapore Memorial. I don't know. It depends how successful the escape was.
Yes.
But we know.
But that's just an aside from the research that you're doing, and you come across this stuff, and it's very interesting.
In actual fact, one of these 110 that escaped, the party were captured by the Japanese. He escaped.
Right.
The rest of the party. Questionnaire, a list of names of men that were executed on the 21st of February.
Yeah.
So, but that's just that coast battery. The 7th coast, we know there were escapes, but there's no definite list, so I've got to go through and make up that list. And then when you do your list, you then got to go and see if the guys survived, or if they were on the Singapore Memorial.
While you're on the topic of escapes, then, sorry, John, but
No,
while you're
sorry.
talking and I'm listening to what you're saying,
No.
I've come across, looking through my dad's things, a page, and I don't know where I got it from. It's just headed as most secret. I don't know if you've given it to me, Keith. But there's descriptions of escapes, but some of them are just described as orderlies. What were orderlies, Keith? Because it says here, I'll read it what it says. There have been 3 attempts at escape. 2 officers, a major and a doctor, tried to escape together with 8 orderlies. The orderlies returned. It's just other ranks then. Okay. The orderlies returned, but the officers were made to dig their own graves and then were beheaded at the edge of each grave. The second attempt was made by 7 orderlies, 4 escaped and 3 were shot whilst running away. The third attempt was made by 10 orderlies 3 months ago and succeeded. I wonder where they went to, goodness me. Having been out to Saigon and looked at the area where they were, it was just dense jungle over the river and, I don't know. I've got to read more. Sorry.
Should be interesting, to get some more information about the Saigon area.
Yeah. Well, this is sort of not the disappointing part, because what happened on the railway and the Sumatran railway was horrendous. But that and I mean Ronnie's own dad was also in Saigon, like my dad. It would be nice to sort of perhaps have some attention paid to other areas where they're imprisoned. A lot more's come out about Japan, which I'm really pleased. That's fascinating to hear about what they were doing with the prisoners in Japan, and to think that some of them actually witnessed the bombs being dropped. Yeah, it's great, but the attention, understandably, is always on the railway. And we have to remember that
it's going to be interesting. I mean, I've got a couple of projects that I've been doing now. I mean, the names is one that I want to get cracked off because that's important. But I'm also doing one on the Long March.
Yeah.
One on FEPOWs held in the Philippines, not passing through, held in the Philippines and released from the Philippines. So I want to get those done on a website as well. But it's again looking at war crimes reports or the Red Cross reports and seeing if there is anything at all on Saigon. I mean, I looked at a file for Keith Bettany the other day, and his dad's name came up on it. And I looked at it, and it's 3 pages. Letter from the Red Cross that's duplicated. So there's 2 of the pages. And the third one is on about Changi. It's about half a page. It's talking about the Australians in 1943, and it sounds like a holiday camp.
Yeah, well, this is how Carol Cooper, when I said where my dad was, that's what she said to me. So that's why I've always been a bit, she says, oh, your dad was in the holiday camp then.
Ernie, he called it Butlins. First time I met him, he called it Butlins.
Yeah.
Which
it was odd, because I met Ernie, well, several times I met Ernie, and he always said he didn't know my dad. But that, which is understandable when there are 1,000 of them plus. But when on that information you found me, that you printed out what was happening just before they were captured, Ernie and my dad were together. But then, you forget, don't you? But, yeah.
There is a Red Cross report in this file on Saigon, so I'll look that one up.
Yeah.
And there will be an earlier report on Saigon in a Foreign Office file, which I will look at as well.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. I mean, when we were at the last, John, I don't know if you went to any of the conferences that Meg Parks and Professor Gill organised, but there was a chap there who did a presentation on the marches, the death marches, and was about to release a book. Have you heard, Keith, as to whether his book has been released as yet?
No.
You know, the chap I made? Because he'd got this I've got it somewhere, because I took a photograph of it on the screen, of where he had this strange experience where he felt that you could see the ghosts. Do you remember that?
John Tulloch.
That's it, yes.
Tired.
Very interesting, interesting.
No, I haven't seen his book come out. He's given COFEPO the register of the men killed at Sandakan.
Right.
That's been put in the building, as I promised him it would.
Yes.
No, I've not heard.
Does that also feature at the museum at Sandakan? Because having been there, just by chance, we came across that when we were in Borneo. I wonder if that register is also in the museum then, whether
I'd
they've got that.
ask him. It may be that it is.
Yeah,
I know he
because
was.
it tends to concentrate on the Australians, I think, when I felt when I went to the museum. And obviously it's Australians that are visiting it mostly. But that would be interesting to know whether that list has been, put up for display in the museum.
See if I've still got the correspondence for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like Hellfire Pass. You know, in actual fact, one guy I know is a researcher. I haven't seen him for years now, Stephen Hagan. His uncle died at Hellfire Pass.
Mm.
He wrote to the Minister for Veterans Affairs in Australia, who never bothered to reply to him, pointing out that before the Australians got there, the Brits were there and were dying like nobody's business.
Yeah.
Never acknowledged. It
Yeah.
was never acknowledged. So, yeah.
That was interesting. Ray's comment about having walked through Hellfire Pass with David, and that it was 40 degrees, and they sort of had to give up their walk. And you think our men and the Ramusha and everybody was working and being made to work all those hours.
We visited Hellfire Pass in 2005, myself, Mike Nellis, and the daughter and granddaughters of Tom Morris, who was the Australian who rediscovered Hellfire Pass with the help of one of the locals. And that's where the museum was built. And the guy who was running it at the time had literally removed all references to Tom Morris and all the rest of it, and he made Gay's life pretty hellish, and he tried to do the same to both Mike and myself until he realised that we were sons of FEPOWs. He didn't last much longer, to be honest. I did meet him again in 2007. His opening comment, "Oh, it's you again." I said, "Yes, it's me." So we were at the dawn service, and I said to Rod, "Why did they put this guy in Hellfire Pass? He's not a particularly nice guy at all." And he said, "That's the way it is with the Australians, but sadly he was swimming somewhere one day in a swimming pool and he had a heart attack. That was it."
Mm.
But we walked through Hellfire Pass all the way to Compressor Cutting, Packer Cars Bridge site, which you can't get to anymore because there's now a road across it. It's a holiday resort. They're building a holiday resort there. So you can only go as far as Hintock Station. But yeah, I mean, we got through God knows how many bottles of water.
Yeah.
What didn't help was one of Gay's daughters, I can't remember her name, it was the oldest one, started shaking as she got malaria. Well, she'd had malaria. She just come back from Africa. So, but it was fortunately it wasn't a malaria attack. So, but yes, it was quite. You walk through it. And how the hell did you build this? It really is incredible.
Yeah, be interesting to talk to Ray hopefully again soon when he's back.
Yeah,
he often comes on, doesn't he?
He's in Thailand at the moment, I think, doing some chores.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's what really is good is to know that when he goes out to Ubon, the locals there are so supportive. And this is what we need, isn't it? It's to know that the local population want this era of their history to be remembered. And it's brilliant. I think the work that Ray is doing out there is going to be great to move forward and keep those memories going. It'd be interesting to hear how David found it. I should think it was very emotional for David.
I would have thought so, especially as his father was with the Stay Behind parties.
Yeah.
I came across the questionnaire yesterday from an Argyle who had escaped during the Malayan campaign, couldn't get back to Singapore, joined the Chinese guerrillas, and there he stayed all the war.
Goodness me. Yeah. Yeah, because the SEO stories are only just coming out now as well, aren't they? And those are fascinating. These different aspects of this, not apart from the railway and all that, but what was happening up in the jungles, all the stories about the SEOs and what they were doing, and they're fascinating. It's there's a lot to be found out still, really, isn't there? And
I'd love to find out more about Force 136. And I picked up a book some years ago. I think Meg's got it at the moment. Tigers Burning Bright.
Yeah.
And it was about the SOE in Malaya and Singapore and Thailand. No, it covered a fair bit, but it didn't cover what I was looking for, which is a shame.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I thought they only existed in Europe, so I was fascinated to find out that they were out there as well, and what they got up to in a very difficult terrain to work in, as opposed to being in
there as
what happened in Europe. Yeah,
very different with the Americans there, because
yeah,
the Americans obviously weren't a colonial power.
mm.
If you ignore the Philippines, Cuba, and other islands, they didn't want the colonial powers getting their colonies back. They were dead against it. It all started with Roosevelt. He was dead against it. It's something him and Churchill didn't agree on. And eventually, of course, obviously, all the colonies had near enough got independence, but they were fighting the Americans as well as not physically fighting, but they had the battle against the Americans, who were obviously controlling the supply lines.
Mm.
Really, as well as the Japanese, and it was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous state of affairs. But I think eventually, between Force 136 and I think it was the OSS, they smoothed it out and they worked perfectly in the jungles of Thailand.
Yeah.
So it's another site to look at. There's a fair old bit actually that when you look at it. But so I looked at this Malay camps one, but it gives all the camps, or near enough all the camps, I should say. But yeah, so I'm going to have a look at that and then have a look at the Foreign Office file and see what that says.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating.
Anything like the one on Singapore, I don't hold out hope.
Mm.
But there must be the correspondence somewhere, unless, whether the International Red Cross will ever let the likes of me or any other researcher in to look at their records on Far East War. All I can do is ask.
Yeah.
And see what they say. They'll probably say, I'm very sorry, but no. It may be because some of the guys are still alive.
Yeah.
But all I can do is ask and say, see what comes up.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to be very cheeky now and change the subject yet again. With the planning for 2020 for coming up, and you're saying that the trustees, Ronnie, I'm sorry, talking about COFEPA, but something occurred to me because Ronnie had put on about Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, which, as I say, I've got the DVD here to watch this afternoon. Would it be appropriate at some point for COFEPO, if they're planning what we're going to do next year? I mean, they had the 2 days, the Lichfield church thing, which was brilliant, and hopefully will be equally as good this time. Did you go? Were you able to go to that, John?
It was
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife and myself were there.
Yeah, and then there was the supper in the evening, and then the
Yeah.
next, which I didn't go to. And the next day there was the service at the NMA with the afternoon where Dickie Bird spoke. Well,
Yes.
couldn't we, I don't know, or at some other time have either this or the Railway Man shown and have a discussion on it? I know I've already asked if maybe if you're doing something where like they need a speaker. I still think John Cooper would be amazing to come and speak to us.
Yeah.
But maybe if you were thinking of perhaps not doing the evening one, maybe the film show, because it's come up at Meg Parks' conference where we discussed with the chap who wrote the screenplay for The Railway Man and all the problems that he encountered. We've got 2 films that really are relevant, and I know there are others. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence actually sort of brings another aspect to being a prisoner of war into it, apart from the cruelty. There's the sexual side of it, which, with John Bowie, portrays that amazingly. But it's just thoughts, because I think being a COFEPO member, it's the best things that we learn are when we get together and we talk about things. And, it would be nice to have those opportunities.
No, I think what they're doing is they're looking at Lichfield, definitely.
Yeah. I think they said they'd booked that. I think Paul said that.
Evening supper, I think they're looking at doing again.
All right, okay.
For the AGM, I'm not sure.
Mm.
John Cooper would probably be a really good good one
Oh,
to get.
it would be brilliant for John. Yeah, yeah,
So I think we should extend the invitation to him because he lives locally. When he's
right.
in Scotland, I believe he's got relatives down here.
Oh,
Uh,
right. Okay.
that,
Yeah,
that might be a good one to get. Um,
yeah.
the NMA on the Saturday, the Malayan Volunteers Group having their service.
Uh-huh.
So they have it on the
Yeah,
actual day.
right.
So whereas FEPOW, I think the bulk would be at Lichfield, then you've got the London one going on again.
Yes. Yeah, I know that Pauline's busy with that. Yeah,
That's being planned.
yeah.
Malayan Volunteers Group will be at the NMA, it'll be in the chapel, which is on the Saturday as well. So I should probably end up being at the NMA,
Yeah.
looking after the building.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and hopefully we'll get, having seen that Tony Fold's got that amazing fly past, we'll get the Dakota again to come over us.
Yeah, that was brilliant, wasn't it?
Oh, the sound of that plane approaching was
Yeah.
just
Yeah, get that done on the
And
Sunday.
brilliant.
the chap was at the back waving. That was fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah, oh, that was
It was
one of the
really
best,
good.
the highlights of it almost,
Yes.
really, to hear that. And we were so blessed with the weather too, weren't we? The clear
Yes,
blue
we were.
sky. But watching what's happened up in Sheffield, it makes me think we need a Tony. Who can we have as our Tony to? I've got to get somebody.
Yeah, we can have a word, see if we get Dakota might be able to get a Spitfire, and we had
Yeah,
a Spitfire when the building was commissioned.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
Maybe we can get a Spitfire.
yes.
But yeah, no doubt Chris has got all that on her.
I know it's a tremendous thing for Chris, and she's so amazing at what she does as well.
She's down in 2020.
I know, and then what will happen?
Well,
Well,
this is going to be the problem because
yeah,
trustees now. I'm 70 this year,
yeah. Well, I was 70 last year. Yeah,
and it's a case of well, okay, if we step down, who's going to run it?
yeah. I know it's a worry. It is a big worry, but I think it's amazing that you are starting to see more grandchildren of FEPOs coming on now.
Well, you're getting more. I mean, the pages that Ronnie set up. There's certainly the FEPOW family.
Yeah,
I mean, we've got one that I've seen this morning, and they're trying to trace a relative. They know very little about him, and Mike Heather as well has got involved. And it's well, give us his name and his number, and let's see what we can find.
yeah,
You know, if you don't know any details, well, fine, okay, we can, we'll do some digging and see what we can find.
yes.
Interestingly enough, we're all engineers,
Uh-huh.
so I wait and see what comes up, and then I go to Q and have a look at the nominal roles, regimental nominal roll, and things like that.
Hmm.
They're another thing that would be handy to photograph, but I don't think if we photograph them, we'll be able to put them online.
Oh, really? Because of it being a photograph, you can't digitize it, or?
You can put a photograph on there. It's not going to be a problem. But I think the issue with the National Archives might be the fact that they can be downloaded.
Oh, I see.
Now,
Then, yeah.
with the
Then you're not,
question are going to be downloaded years ago.
yeah.
So I don't have to worry about that one. But it's if we put anything else on, I mean, they might turn around and say, "Well, are you charging for this?" No. Anybody can download. We don't charge a fee for it. If you want to belong to the charity, fine. But I think copyright is probably one thing that we're going to have a really good look at and then see if we can get as much as we can online.
Copyright's a big issue, isn't it? Because I use Ronnie's site a lot, and for the prayers that I use when I do the services, and it jumped out at me again yesterday because Ronnie's got his site copyrighted, and I do ask him, or tell him if I'm going to use something. But yeah, I don't feel easy about even doing that now because of knowing what issues can arise from this copyright.
If you ask and you get the person's consent, then you have done everything you could possibly do.
Yeah.
You're not breaking any law at all.
Yeah. But with Margaret's prayer, I keep going to call her Margaret Michael, when I was, you said, oh gosh, I know Margaret Michael. Mary Michael. I suddenly thought, oh my gosh, have I done the wrong thing using that? But I mean, I'd asked Ron, was it okay for me to use things off the site in the past? And he's always said it's okay. And I'm not making money out of it, so.
Copyright is owned by Mary, not Ronnie.
But it's on Ronnie's site, so
Copyrighted his site. I know he has.
yeah. It is something that it is just an anxiety. I'd hate anybody to think that I was using it, but I don't use anything for monetary gain, so I'm sure.
If you ask, it's fine. But it's with the National Archives. It's Crown copyright. That's another matter. And it's something I really. It may mean I've got to make an appointment to go and see somebody, but it may mean that I've got to actually sit down with someone and say, right, if we wanted to do this, what objections would you have? And then just go through it bit by bit by bit. There's not many people there on a Saturday. It's getting fewer and fewer. I mean, we used to sit in the restaurant, and there'd be a big TV. So it was on quiet, but you watch the BBC News and things like this. Here 2 weeks ago. So here we go. But the thing I'm most worried about is that this stuff eventually may end up in deep storage, and then you'll never see it. You've got to give a three-day request to see a deep storage item, and you have to go up there during the week, which is a problem. But no, I'd like to ask, so perhaps we could actually get some bits and pieces on the site, rather than have to sit here and do spreadsheets, which I'm going to have to do for a number of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a bit of a complex. But it's no. If you ask Ronnie and Ronnie says yes, that's you're okay. It's just if somebody downloads something from Ronnie's site, which they shouldn't do. What's that doing coming up there? If somebody downloads something they shouldn't do and tries to make profit or gain from it, then that is, that's a no-no basically. But no, I mean it's a case of getting as much on. Well, Ronnie's got stacks on his site, the Roll of Honour and all the other bits and pieces. If we get these names done and put the simple search on, that might help as well.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we put a simple search on for questionnaires. That might be a point. I have to ask Guy. That'd be handy if we could, because then you could just type in the name like Ronnie does, and it comes or not.
Yeah.
I'll think about that one. There is a simple search on the FEPOW site, so if you type in a name, it will bring up everything where that guy is listed in, I believe. That's what I've been told. I've used it a couple of times, and it seems to work fairly well. But it's not the simple search for names that Ronnie was using on the old site. And we were looking into getting that resurrected for a while, but as the guy said to us, it's written in a language we don't use.
Yeah, and that's going to be a problem because you've got to be future-proof things as well too, haven't you? Really, as time goes by, because as Ronnie has experienced, the technology changes and
very much so.
The languages that are used now in that. When I was doing computer studies, when I was way back when I was 18, 19, the language we used then was very, very simple, and it's evolved tremendously, and the way it's done. So yeah, so everything that you do is very expensive and has to be future proofed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nothing's easy.
No, put the membership price up again. Oh dear. Yeah. I think really for what we get for our membership, both with Ronnie's group and that, we amazing what we do get in return, and I hope people do appreciate it all. But there you go. Sorry, my political broadcast.
It's very nice. It brings people out of the woodwork. Is probably the wrong thing to say, but if suddenly it's he was a prisoner. Who can I turn to? Prisoner of the Japanese. You're gradually getting more people coming on board because of that, and some of them are quite happy to write it up as well, which is good.
Yeah.
I mentioned George Reynolds last week, who died a couple of weeks ago now. His funeral now is next Friday in Newport. I thought at one stage that the local press didn't do much when he was 100. But if you searched South Wales Argus, you'll find a report that they did for him, and I think it was on the BBC News at the time as well. So Slight apologies to the local press, but there was an article when he was 100. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go to the funeral on Friday. It's my wife's birthday on the Friday, and we were away for a few days, and that was already pre-booked. So unfortunately, but it'll be a massive turnout. He
Yes.
was uh, he
Yeah.
was a member of the local Masonic lodges, and he was held in high regard there.
Wow.
I met him in 1978 for the first time, and he worked with my father just after the war, but they didn't know one another in the factory. They worked in separate parts of the factory where they worked, and so it'll be a massive turnout. So that might be in the local press again. For they probably, I would think, the area where he's getting the church they're using is in Maindy, Newport, and it's quite a busy junction there. I would think they'll have to shut one of the roads.
Mm.
That's how big
Mm.
I think it's gonna be
Okay.
for the funeral.
Yeah.
So that's next Friday.
It's lovely to see that some of these old ones now still get a big turnout. My father's brother was buried just over a week ago on the 22nd of February. And well, like George had done, he'd probably been, he carried on and done lots of things. But I mean, we had 4 standard bearers. The church had to organise parking
Yeah,
attendance, and it was lovely to see for those old fellas, because so often now, when they pass on, um, they aren't really, paid much. There aren't people left. But I mean, I was amazed to see standards for the RAOC and the RASC as well provided
right.
for him. The British
Mm,
Legion really pulled out the stops to help us
mm.
with his funeral. So hopefully they will do the same for George as well.
Yeah,
Then.
he had a short illness. It was only 2 or 3 weeks. He had a chest infection and succumbed to that.
Oh, bless him.
So it was, and he was. I spoke to him probably. His birthday was the 21st of July, as was my father's, as is mine.
Oh,
So
goodness me, what a
I spoke to him.
coincidence.
Yes, I
Mm.
know. I spoke to him a couple of days before his 100th birthday, and I spoke to him since. But and I said to him, he was at the one of the, I think it was the 70th anniversary, and he was on the TV, and he was speaking to the Duke of Edinburgh, and I said
Mm.
to him, "What did the Duke say to you?" And George said, "I can't remember," and started to laugh. So he couldn't remember
Yeah.
what he said to him. But he was a good old stick, George.
Well, I was hoping. So it's funny that you should mention the Duke of Ed, because he's been the one that's been on my mind, who really should say something for this coming up. And I mean, perhaps it's because it's particularly relevant to the group that I'm with, because we tend to celebrate the surrender. Not the surrender, the actual signing of the surrender, more than VJ Day. And obviously, Prince Philip was on board the boat, the SS Missouri, on that day. And it would have been nice for him to have said something, perhaps in anticipation, because it's awful to say he may not be here when we're celebrating those days, because he's, 97 now, isn't he? Is he older than that?
Yeah,
99.
97.
Yeah, it would be nice to know that he could put some input into to that, as he was on the ship at the time, and involved being out in the Far East. So whether
Mm.
FEPOW or somebody could perhaps tempt him to get something done for us. Yeah, because the 2 FEPOWs swam out to the ship, didn't they? And he met them at one of the FEPOW do's in Blackpool, so Pam Stubbs told me. Do you remember that, Key?
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
yes, right. He was on the destroyer, HMS Whelp, I think the destroyer was.
Right, okay. But he was sort of there in Tokyo Bay, I believe, at the time, wasn't he? Yeah.
One of those ships
So,
were converted to pick up POWs and bring them out to the carriers and hospital ships.
yeah. But 2
Um,
of them actually managed to swim out to the ship, and he met them, and they were there.
you look at the
Pam,
look at
sorry?
the condition of those men. They were lucky to make it.
Well, was it a
Yeah.
2 mile swim or something? It was some amazing distance that they managed to swim, and that is the sort of story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We've looked at those American men who were killed when they tried to avoid hitting Tony Falls, which was brilliant. But the fact that those men felt so inspired to swim out to those ships for the surrender is another big story to me. But I'm an emotional person. But the fact that it's connected with Prince Philip, it's a big thing. But he was at they held a reunion at the Winter Gardens, and Prince Philip spoke and he mentioned them, and one of them apparently was in the audience and met Prince Philip afterwards.
Just realised next Friday is the 8th of March.
Yeah.
Port of Java.
Right.
Surrendered on the 8th of March,
Yeah.
1942.
Yeah. See, so much focus is on Singapore, doesn't it? And it's a bit of a shame that some of the other dates for capture. I think last year at the service when we did the thing and mentioned how the Japanese really they were very clever, weren't they? The way that they did all these invasions and moved on from one area to another, and as we said, it was almost a blitzkrieg done by the Japanese along the lines of the Germans.
There's one thing we've got to be grateful for. They made the same mistake as the Germans.
Yeah, overstretched themselves. Yeah.
Come as liberators, they came as conquerors.
Yeah.
If the Japanese had come as liberators, as they were originally told to do,
yeah,
and not oppress the locals or anything like that, it could have been a whole different story.
Actually, Keith, that's right. Yeah, yes, yeah. Yeah. Well, that goes back to that picture of them shooting those Indian soldiers, really, because a lot of the Indians that went over to the Japanese discovered to their regret that the Japanese were far worse than the British, weren't they?
And they weren't being supported at all by the Japanese. They were being used as cannon fodder, basically. Yeah. I've read a book on the Indian Army years ago, and I've given it to somebody now to read because he's interested in the subject. But that was an eye-opener.
Yeah.
And they had several of the men after the war where trials were held at the Red Fort by the British.
Mm.
And they didn't quite turn out how the British wanted them to.
Yeah.
Because the locals were in support of the Indian National Army. They were trying to liberate our country from the colonial powers.
Yeah.
So how can we possibly support a colonial power?
Yeah.
So that was a bit for the Brits as well. But
yes, if only they'd looked at what was happening in China, with all the brutality there, maybe they'd have been a bit less likely to think that the Japanese were going to free them from oppression, really. But it's okay with hindsight.
You say that. I mean, one of the last, Terry Takuchi, I think his name was. He was the head of the Southern Army when Japan surrendered. And one of the last things he did before the surrender was signed is say to Sukarno in Indonesia, "We give you your independence."
Oh well, yeah.
And look what that kicked off.
Oh yeah, that was awful. That was cruel too, wasn't it? Yeah.
Vietnam, or French Indochina as was.
Yes.
She said to the Americans, "When we do our declaration, we would like to use your Declaration of Independence as ours as well." And within a very short space of time, the Americans somehow turned around and said, "Well, you're supported by the communists. We can't do that."
Yeah.
Or it's something. There was some upset anyway. And Ho Chi Minh was very, very upset about that. And of course, the French then came back into Indochina, and that kicked off.
Yeah.
So you had Indochina and then Vietnam War, and it's only recently, I suppose, or certainly in my memory, that the country's at peace.
Oh yes, It's a fascinating country, but they know nothing about what happened in the Second World War, or there's no memory because it's all been superseded by the war with the Americans. So when I went out to follow what happened to my dad in Saigon, and I asked them, they had no idea. They were amazed that I'd come out to find out something about the Second World War, the present, and it's understandable. The Vietnamese that are there now are only interested in the war with America, and they've got all the museums and everything for that. But apart from the go-down still being there on the river, there was nothing to mark that's where all those prisoners were held, or where the airfield was that Dad worked on, or anything like that. I've never been able to find out where the airfield was. That's something else I'll look at. I've
I
only
don't
got
know that.
Phnom, something like that.
Right, sorry.
Phnom, is it Pnom, something like that?
Well,
I'll have to.
And Pen is the only one I know.
that's the only one I know. That's in Cambodia, just over the border.
Yeah, but this I'll
Right.
I'll look it up in his things that I've got out again. I've been so busy. Well, I say not so busy because what you chaps do is amazing. But sort of doing other things that poor Dad has sort of slipped back a bit. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, come on. You know this, Keith, because how long have I been nagging for you to do your dad's things as well, you know?
Well, I got the page done, so I'm
Yeah.
pleased with that. That was
Yeah.
that took some time because I actually went all through his papers. So I got all his papers in one place now.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I'm still
sit down and write it up.
never sure of the exact date that Dad actually got there. I mean, I'm looking at now at a telegram that he sent from Singapore on the 5th of February 1942, but all it says is loving greetings, best wishes and good health. Please don't worry.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the 5th. 10 days later, they were worried.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, 'cause he went with the Gonens party, didn't he?
Yeah,
That was left in April.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
So that was the first overseas party.
Yeah, yeah. It must have been a strange feeling for them, wondering where on earth they were off to and what was going to happen to them. They'd been the first lot to go out. But yeah, potentially perhaps they were the lucky ones as to where they went. But if 3.5 years of imprisonment is lucky for anyone in any circumstance without family contact, no, it isn't luck, is it?
I mean, it's rightly so. If you look at Indochina, it focuses on the prisoners in Saigon. A lot of them were sent up country.
Yeah.
You know, you get this. I mean, Ronnie's dad went out, I think it's 2nd of February, 45.
Yeah.
Japan Party 4. And they just got as far as Saigon. And they always write that down as Camp 10. Camp 10 actually was up north. There's 2 camps up north, according to the Japanese records. Camp 8 was Saigon. Of course, all these come back stamped up Camp 10. But of course, these are the Tokyo cards. These aren't the cards that were with the prisoners. So they went up in smoke. You know, they used to give a card index of all the guys on the railway. Each group, headquarters, had its own card index. And they would index all the moves and all the rest of it. All the, if they died, what they died from. It all kept. Of course, once they surrendered on the 15th of August, destroy your records. That's exactly what they did.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, I think I mentioned it to you, Keith, maybe at our last meeting, or maybe it was to somebody else, that I re-looked at where I've got my mum's got Dad's medals mounted in the case, and his POW years were 15th of February to the 12th of September. But I think that was the date that they were actually liberated from Saigon. And I think it would be useful, perhaps, if future video meetings, if we did a timeline of when the releases were, because we've got timelines for other things, but the timelines of actually the release from different camps varies quite dramatically, doesn't it?
Right. Well, on my father's card, it's got released 30th of August 1945.
Right.
No, he wasn't. 2 men from the Long March. Part of that Long March ended up in his camp. 2 of the men had smallpox, so the camp wasn't. Yeah, the camp was quarantined.
Absolutely.
Didn't get out of the camp itself until I think the 3rd week of September.
Yeah.
Regardless of what it says on his card.
Yeah. Because I think my dad's journey home was quite quick, because if they weren't set free until the 12th of September, he was back at Liverpool on the 19th of October.
But he would have flown from Saigon to Rangoon.
Oh, right. And then, because I've got the pictures of him in Colombo and that sort of thing.
Certainly a couple of the planes went down, sadly.
Yeah.
But I believe they may have flown from Saigon to Rangoon. How many of them did go across country? I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's something
On my,
else worth digging out.
on my father's record, it says um, in captivity until the 27th of October, and then home on the 28th. So I mean, I think the 27th would be the date that the ship docked.
Mm.
And I'm not certain whether that then would have been the ship trial.
Yes, yeah. It was
Would
said
that have
that
docked on the 27th?
28th.
On the 28th? Right. Was that the only ship to dock on the 28th?
I can check for you, he says, hopefully.
I think Ronnie said that there was only one ship docked on the 28th. But the two dates are confusing because it's got on his record that whole captivity 27, or I can't quickly find it now. But then home on his record then on the 28th. Home probably meaning home leave, I would have thought. Where that is now. It's in that big file.
73.
Where did I do that on the bed?
73.
He was in Takuri. I think your father was there, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah. Who does he give as the camp commander?
Sorry?
Does he mention the camp commander?
No. 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 Subconductor Wild. He was under, I think. That was the last one. I can't see it now.
Yeah, 28th of October. The only one was the Chitrao.
Right.
From Rangoon anyway.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody thinks that the 15th of August the war was over, and that's it. You know, you speak to anybody in the population, and they would say, "Oh, well, 15th of August, that was it," but it wasn't the end of it for them. It wasn't the end.
No.
And for those that stayed in Malaya and places like that, the war went on. Well, not the war, but the clearing up operation and the tracking down of the Japanese went on a heck of a long time, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think Richard Brown has just posted something on Facebook. A picture of Taiping jail when he was out there, because he was out there tracking his father's path down Malaya.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really does make you wonder, you know, what they were coming across or what they came across.
I bet they came across some horrendous things, and of course the Japanese didn't always want to surrender, so I should think they were still under attack months even after the surrender was signed, and or booby traps had been left for them, all that sort of thing.
Well, in Saigon or French Indochina,
Yeah.
they were having trouble with the Viet Minh.
Yeah. Well, Ernie Goff himself was told not to go out dressed in shorts. He told this tale. He said he was off out for a good night on the town, and they said, "Don't go out looking like that because you'll be shot because they think you're French."
Yeah.
And so they faced that sort of thing.
Because it was the Brits that took over initially French Indochina, went to liberate French Indochina, and were having trouble with the Viet Minh because the Viet Minh realised that the Brits were going to bring the French back, and the British did all they could. They rearmed the Japanese and said to the Japanese, "Sort it out," and they did. They did the same in Java as well, where they could.
Yeah.
Parts of Java, the Japanese were in league, if you like, with Sukarno's guys.
Yeah.
So, just one of those things, really, sadly.
Yes, because when you listen to stories, going back to the Sukarno problems, people like Elizabeth Van Kampen, that I'm sure you know, Keith, she was saying how awful it was over there for the population and the troubles that ensued. I mean, to me as a child, Sukarno and growing up was the president, and that was it. And you don't realise that when the war is finished, it just really sparks off little civil wars here, there, and everywhere.
Did it Malaya?
Yeah, which were very sad, really, weren't they? And the Malaya and problems out there with their persecution of the Rohingya and all this sort of thing. It's never really settled down, has it?
But with Burma's had problems
Yeah.
after the war. I think literally everywhere where the Japanese touched, and then when the war finished, it left this vacuum. And yes, there was you had the war, or the Malaya insurgency or emergency as they called it out there. So you had that one, and that was basically backed by Indonesia. You had the problems in the Dutch East Indies, French Indochina, India. We left with very, very indecent haste.
Yeah.
Had the partition, and that kicked off a whole massacre of people. The death toll of that was incredibly high. And you see India and Pakistan, it's still going on.
Absolutely. Mm. Yeah.
Right,
and
folks.
there's a vacuum now in Singapore, isn't there? Because Dyson's going out there. Sorry.
Very good. You've been saving that one up.
Absolutely. He's gone over. Yeah, that's very sad, actually, isn't it, that Dyson's gone over there?
I suppose, you
have to look after yourselves.
Basically, I think that's what it is, but so I'm not going to get into politics.
No. It was just a relevant comment. Anyway, guys, I'm going to run off and leave you and do other things. It's been a really interesting chat. Thank you ever so much. And
yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll catch up with you again soon. Is any news when Ron's going to come back on to us?
No, not that I know of at the moment. I think when he feels able to. I mean, he must have a heck of a lot of stress, all this movement, things like this.
It's been awful for him. So sad. I don't know if he's decided whether to find somewhere else or whether he's keeping alive the hopes of where they wanted to go. But whatever, I hope it sorts out for him and Julian.
I hope it's all going a lot better than it has for him. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, could have done without that, couldn't he? The joys of house moving. Anyway, guys, have a good day. I'll see you a week or so, Keith, at our next Bar FEPOW meeting. And John, I hope you sort out what you're looking forward to. Okay, bye, both. Bye.
Speak to you soon.
Okay, let's turn the recording off.
Yeah.